Good evening, and welcome to Caritas a Cappella Ensemble's performance of The Sacred Veil by Eric Whitacre, a first for the Charlotte area. The music is scheduled to begin at 7:30 p.m. If all you want is to listen to the music, tune in again at that time. But leading up to that, we have some interesting and important information for you that will aid in your understanding and appreciation of tonight's music. My name is Tiffany Crank, Cancer Program Development Specialist at the Levine Cancer Institute in Charlotte, North Carolina. Levine is the proud sponsor of this event because we appreciate having the opportunity to bring an artistic perspective to the journeys faced by our cancer patients. The Sacred Veil is a deeply personal work dealing with loss associated with cancer, in this case, the death of Julie Silvestri to ovarian cancer in 2005. Julie was a 35-year-old loving mother of 2 young children and wife of Charles Anthony Silvestri, the poet and librettist of The Sacred Veil. Tony, as he's known to his friends, began to assemble the libretto almost 10 years after Julie's death at Eric's invitation. This invitation would start him on a journey which would help him finally grieve the loss of his wife. It took courage for Tony to relive his loss so publicly, and compassion on Eric's part to stand alongside his friend in his pain and wrap the story in such breathtaking music. The coronavirus pandemic has rewritten our life stories in many dramatic ways over the past year and a half, bringing with it a myriad of losses. Loss of employment and financial security, loss of mental health, loss of community, and in the case of over 4.5 million people worldwide, loss of life. While others have had to watch at a distance as their loved ones succumb to cancer, COVID, or other causes, unable to hold proper funerals in their memory. The Sacred Veil faces strong emotions head on, emotions like love and fear and grief and hope. It is our desire that through this work you might find yourself connecting with some of these emotions. I don't know of too many concerts about grief. It's not exactly a popular topic. But at times like these, Caritas and Levine Cancer Institute feel that much good can come from sitting for a moment with our own losses, making room for deeper healing and hope. At the end of the concert, we urge you to stay with us for a few additional minutes as Dr. Patrick Metters, overseer of the psycho-oncology team at Levine Cancer Institute, shares insights about healthy grief. Thanks again for joining us tonight. You are in for an amazing concert. Caritas Artistic Director Cathy Youngblood is here to share some interesting background on the story, but before she does, she would like to introduce you to a special guest.
Good evening and welcome to Caritas a Cappella Ensemble's performance of The Sacred Veil. I'm here with a very special mission this evening to introduce you to UJ Harris and Psychology for All. Part of Caritas's mission is to connect and partner with other local nonprofit organizations that are doing good work in the Charlotte area. And we just want UJ to welcome you tonight and also to hear a little bit more about what Psychology for All is all about.
Yeah, good to meet you, Cathy. And you know, when we first spoke, I told you I'm a huge fan of a cappella music and choral music in general. Actually got to sing when I was in high school. I was part of the choir there.
Great.
At Country Day.
You want to audition?
Yes, I would like to do that actually. So you know, let's schedule something for that. I think I have something left in me still. And then did some a cappella in college, and I've always been a fan of music and enjoyed singing in some worship bands and stuff in church. So I love what you all are doing, and I'm really excited that you all have chosen us to be part of this. Psychology for All started I say about 6 years ago, and it was through a conversation between some folks at Southeast Psychology, and I believe what is now New City Church. They used to be called Church of Charlotte, I believe. And then I think a couple of other folks who were probably more independent practitioner of psychology or psychotherapy, I would call it. And they saw a need, to really bring sort of mental health services and really quality mental health services to sort of the masses and those folks who are under-resourced, underserved communities. Because let's be honest, good counseling and good therapy is not cheap. Right. And most folks can't afford that. And so they saw that opportunity to sort of address that gap. And so the organization was founded in, I believe it was 2015. And it took some time to really sort of build the rails when you're trying to deal with something so sensitive as healthcare, especially mental health care. So they had to go through all the HIPAA regulation issues, build just the right procedures and processes, get the word out into the community, figure out where the people we wanted to serve were, and so forth. And but we've been operating, I would say, fully for the last few years, where we've been helping people and just doing what we say we want to do. From a mission perspective, there are really two things. One, awareness of the fact that mental health is a critical part of sort of whole person, whole body health, and it's important, and it's nothing to be ashamed of if you're struggling with anxiety, depression, or even sort of things on the other end of the spectrum in terms of more severe things. It's okay. And it's also important to address that just as much as you want to change your diet, exercise, whatever, And so we're big on awareness. And then the other piece is access. And that's where our partners, our sponsors, our donors, and the folks who we've received grant from, they help us with providing the capital we need to work with a series of psychotherapists, counselors, and I guess I was going to say counselors, psychologists, whoever, who provide the actual services. And what we do is we have an application process that is, I think is pretty simple, where someone who has a need can apply for. Well, we have a team of folks who look at their application, and we want to make sure that we're serving people who really need it. So if you have money, decent income, if you have health insurance, and that has access to mental health, we want you to utilize those. For folks who don't, who are making low income, and especially around the poverty line, and who have insurance maybe with really high deductibles and stuff like that, we want to serve those people. And so we try to we have a little bit of a screener to kind of find those people, and then we pay for 8 sessions with a therapist, and that therapist is matched based on their needs, based on if there's some language barriers. So we have bilingual therapists, we have African American, Hispanic, and I mean we cover the spectrum, men, women, and so forth, and we try to match those folks, and then we pay for them to have 8 sessions for starters, and then if they need more, we can do another 8, and I think we haven't gone through full 16 yet, so I don't know what happens after that. But if there are needs, there are other partners we can work with, like the project. The Smith Family Center, Karen, there are other organizations that I think we can sort of transfer them to, but I don't think we've gotten that far yet in my experience being part of the organization.
Do the clients normally seek you out, or do you have a way of finding them to offer the help?
That's a fantastic question. I think we are still having to get the word out, so we're having to find them. And so what we've done over the last few years is partner with organizations that are serving the people we want to reach. So what is the Harvest Center, Caring, Project 658, the Shelter Health Services, I believe it's called, and I think there are a couple other organizations, and we continue to actually build that network where we're here, and we want to partner with you. So we are really still seeking people out at this time. The vision, my hope is that at some point people know of us so well, right, that they're going to our website or calling our number or just reaching out to us when there's a need.
Well, maybe some of the people who are watching this interview will know of someone that might need your assistance. So this is a great way to get the word out. Show us your logo.
Oh yeah, so I'm a walking billboard. So this is a Psychology for All shirt. There's some words on the back. It's got our mission statement. But I'm so proud to be part of this organization. If I may, I grew up in Liberia, West Africa, lived through a civil war, and I was fortunate to be part of a community, a village or a community of people that I shared that experience with, but it was obviously very, very scary and very traumatic. And as I got older, I started to reflect on the psychological impact of that experience on me, but then of course on just on other people. You start thinking about trauma. So that led me to study psychology in college. So I was curious about behavior and why we do what we do. And then I've been involved with Psych for All pretty much since inception. And I'm actually thinking now that maybe the next chapter of my life is leaving business and going into maybe become a psychologist or provider of some kind. But it's an area of our lives, I think, that we don't hear enough about. And but I'm glad to see that we're hearing more about it. And I'm glad that you guys chose us to feature.
Well, you know, this is a neat kind of thing. But first of all, Caritas is also about 6 years old, so we're celebrating birthdays together.
Congrats, yeah, that's exciting.
And the other thing that I find in common is that the reason why we have chosen to do the Sacred Veil is specifically because the community right now is so overwhelmed with grief and loss because of the pandemic.
Yes.
Although the topic is about loss due to cancer, but everyone experiences loss in one way or another.
Yeah, exactly.
And because it's so personal an issue, the work is a very personal work.
Yeah.
And 3 of our singers backed off of the concert, begged off of the concert because it was too emotionally difficult to relate to. But on the beautiful part of this is that both of our organizations are engaging with people at the place where they have emotional needs.
Yeah.
And I love that fit into this particular concert.
I love it. I'm smiling. Next time I'm going to have one of
these masks where you can
because I'm
see.
smiling too, because it's fantastic. You know, one of the things I learned is that sort of trauma and the challenges in our lives, and we're losing and we, like you said, we've lost a lot of lives, but I think we've lost our freedom, we've lost our sense of security. We just celebrated the 20th anniversary of 9/11, if I recall correctly, and so we lost a lot of our sense of safety, and so there's a lot of loss, and they come in different shapes and forms. But what I've learned, and I think this is true, is that trauma, these hard things can be destructive. Obviously, we know a lot about that, but they can also be very constructive in terms of helping us to be more resilient, to be overcomers, and to just grow from them. And I think that's what I'm about, and that's what our organization is about. It sounds like that's what you all are about, so this is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, in your time with Psychology for All, is there any particular situation that you have seen where you've just really seen an impact in someone's life?
We had a mom, and who I believe was originally from Mexico, who was struggling with some depression and anxiety, and she was a single mom, and she applied, and we got her through, and we're fortunate to hear that the sessions really helped her sort of work through some of her anxiety and depression and do it to get back to work and take care of her family. And that story really meant a lot to me because my mom had just the two of us, my 2 boys, and I couldn't imagine if she went through any sort of prolonged period of battling with anxiety or anything that would keep her from work. We probably would have been on the streets. So that is a story of, that's one that I like to tell. And I think there are quite a few stories like that. And we're trying to do a better job of capturing those stories and starting to really share those testimonials, because I think it really sort of humanizes the work we do.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of opportunities to do that.
Well, I'm very touched by that story, and I can see that you can relate to it as well. So any of these stories that people can connect with just make it so much more valuable of a mission.
Yes.
Now, Caritas will be making the first of tonight's donations to Psychology for All in hopes that it will help provide perhaps a scholarship for someone to receive that kind of care.
Absolutely.
Tell us about how our viewers might also contribute towards that end.
Yeah, look, we depend on your help, and we raise, as I said, we have a lot of wonderful people and organizations who give money, and every dollar goes to helping somebody get a chance to either sit down with a therapist in person or virtually now. There's a ton of teletherapy or virtual telemedicine happening. And so if you want to help us, which I believe you do, and go to www.psychologyforall.org, and there's a donate button there, and there's a page to donate. But just first get to know the organization. I think it's important to know what you're supporting. But psychologyforall.org, we have updated our website, and I think you'll find plenty of information there to really, help you understand sort of what you're supporting and the impact of that your dollars will drive. Excuse me.
Thank you so much, UJ. It's been a pleasure hearing from you and hearing about Psychology for All. And we hope that our viewers will also look you up and learn more about you.
Yeah, and we're excited to be partnered with you all, and we are going to continue to support your organization as best as we can. I know I personally will, because I love this music, and we are going to have that audition.
Hey, you got it.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Tonight's performance of The Sacred Veil was originally intended to be a live, in-person concert. But because of recent upsurges in COVID cases, we've opted to bring you this virtual concert instead. And we're very grateful to all of the technical team that have helped make this become a reality. With increased production costs, however, and no ticket sales, that does mean a little bit of a financial pinch for Caritas. So we would just like to encourage you to consider making a donation to Caritas A Cappella Ensemble tonight by going to our website, www.caritasacapella.org, and go to the Support Us page and click Donate. Perhaps you might consider donating the amount that you might pay to go see a live in-person concert. But whatever you can give, or even if you can give nothing at all, we welcome you to the program tonight, and we look forward to sharing it with you. I'd like to share just a couple of details about the music itself that will hopefully enhance your appreciation of it when you listen to it. Eric Whitacre does a lot of musical symbolism, and one of the things that he did for The Sacred Veil was to use a single note as the thin veil between the life of the temporal world and the eternal. And he used middle C as that veil note. He starts the program with that C, and he ends the program with nothing but that thin C. The entire program, you will find, that very rarely ever leaves the tonality of C minor mostly. And then he also included a theme for Julie Silvestri. She is the woman who is the subject of tonight's concert. She passed away of ovarian cancer in 2005. And the theme personifying her is a minor third from C to E flat and back. And then he also creates a theme for cancer. He superimposes on a major chord where the lower voices are singing. He superimposes a treble minor chord. So you have the conflict between the major and the minor third, creating that tension and anxiety. In February of 2017, I was privileged to attend a concert at Duke University Chapel with the Eric Whitacre Singers. And as part of the program, Eric turned to the audience and said, "I'm going to introduce you to a new piece that I just finished writing this afternoon. It's hot off the press. I just taught it to my choir. It's called You Rise, I Fall." You Rise, I Fall is the 11th of the 12 movements in this work. And I was stunned by it. It brought me to tears. It carries you emotionally up to the place where a soul might leave the body and join the angelic hosts, and then the soul of one who is left behind falls into the deepest pit. They say that the best concert is a concert that tells a story. And this is definitely a storytelling concert. And in order for you to be able to appreciate the story in greater detail, I'm going to include one final little prelude to the music tonight and ask that you would listen to this conversation between the composer, Eric Whitacre, and the librettist, Tony Silvestri. And he shares from his perspective, his experience, and the story behind the loss of his wife in the Sacred Veil.
My wife died in 2005, and I had a long time to think and to grieve and not to grieve, as we'll talk about. But this first movement of the piece represents a kind of 35,000-foot view of everything that I've learned about this grief process and about life and death and eternity. And it's in that poem that this idea of the sacred veil between this world and eternity first sort of took shape. Whenever there is birth or death, the sacred veil between the worlds grows thin and opens slightly up, just long enough for love to slip silent, either in or out of this our fragile, fleeting world, whence or whither a new home waits. And our beloved ones draw near, in rapt anticipation or in weary gratitude they stand. Our loved ones stand so close, right here, just on the other side of eternity. As a poet, I hadn't written about Julie's death. I hadn't written about her cancer. I hadn't written about my grief. I hadn't written about the sadness, the anger, the frustration. I just had never explored it. And I was in Los Angeles for a funeral of a beloved aunt of mine, my Aunt Joan. And I left the copy of the poem on Eric's piano while I went to the funeral, and I was going to read this poem as well.
It was at the piano, and I sat down. Usually, by the way, my process is to memorize a poem and live with it for days or weeks or sometimes months before music starts to emerge. And here I just started reading it and started playing along. And I could see the structure. The moment I read it, all of the music is built into the poetry itself, which is Tony's great talent as a poet.
With this particular piece, what I found happening was Eric was exploring sonic worlds. He was almost pushed into a totally new landscape, inventing a kind of new language to express these thoughts and these words of mine. Well, and I remember that moment too where you suggested that there were more movements of this work, that it wasn't just this one poem, that this poem would explode out, it would grow out like a seed into multiple movements. And we had long conversations about what this piece could be and could we even do it? Could we go to the place that we needed to go to in order to write this work? And I think what I had to come to grips with when Eric and I decided to explore this idea in multiple movements was that I finally, as a poet, had to go to those dark places. I had to revisit the moment of Julie's death. I had to revisit the joy of our love together, and then the sadness and sorrow of her diagnosis, and the heartache about thinking about our kids, and the fact that Julie wanted to be a mom. All these emotions, these places that I didn't really want to go to again. I had to journey there again in order to create the texts that are in the Sacred Veil. And Eric was so tender and so generous and so, well, he was my brother, leading me through that process and encouraging me and giving me the time and the space that I needed to write what I needed to write.
I started for myself. I said, let's just start with the pillars of a story. And so the first thing I asked Tony to write about was the moment of Julie's death. And then I gave him very, very specific music that was taken directly from this first movement that we'd already written, saying it needs to be in this exact meter. And that was the movement, You Rise, I Fall.
I found that immensely comforting. Giving me that little bit of musical material became a kind of crutch almost. It was a handrail that I could hold on to as I went to that deep place.
And then after that, the next thing I asked Tony to write about was the moment that he knew that he was in love. And that's the third movement, which is called Home. And you described this moment that, well, why don't you tell it, Tony, that you were there on your second date,
Yeah,
I think.
it was our second date, and we had taken a drive through this beautiful canyon road to the J. Paul Getty Museum in Malibu. up on a bluff overlooking the Pacific. And then we had a picnic on the beach. We were just lying there on a blanket with the waves crashing around us, and we were talking and talking and talking for so long. And both of us just knew that we were safe with each other and that we were at home with each other.
So then we had this first piece, didn't know what that was going to be or where it would sit, whenever there is birth or death. And now we had the moment of love and the moment of death. And those became the pillars. All right, how do we build now this little cathedral?
We thought that maybe Julie's voice should be heard in this piece. And so I did something that I hadn't done since she died, which was read through her journals, her diaries. I read through her medical record. I read through all of her email blogs. In her journal, I found this, and she'd labeled it magnetic poetry. And I remember somebody had given us one of those poetry sets with the little words, little magnet words, and you stick them on the fridge. And, every time we'd go by, we would move words around and write little poems to each other. And unbeknownst to me, she had written some of these down that she had created on the fridge. And I saw this one and sent a photograph of it to Eric. We had been married a few years, and Julie desperately wanted to be a mother, and we wanted a family so badly, and we were having such a hard time conceiving a child. We were just beginning to explore infertility treatment when she finally did get pregnant with our first child. And so she talks about egg ache and not yet a mother and am I a woman?
With our two characters, if you will, with Tony as the hero and Julie, it's essential that we know them, see their love, see the birth of the child, all of that before the cancer is even introduced. When Tony sent me this poem, Magnetic Poetry, I would have to say I knew Julie in a way that I didn't get to know her when she was alive reading that. So I feel like by the time we get to movement 6, I'm afraid we found something, that we really know these two people. We've really invested in them. As an audience, you really feel it because now you're holding hands on the journey with the two of you.
She felt very strongly that if she was going to go through cancer, this journey, that she was going to be a help to other women, especially young moms who were going through cancer as well. And so there are 2 entries in The Sacred Veil that are drawn from Julie's email blog. The first one is the one you're referring to here, Delicious Times, where she describes losing her hair and the kids' reaction to her losing her hair. And then the second one is where she asks for prayer. This was toward the end when she had received a pretty dire prognosis from the doctor. And she was desperately asking her prayer warriors, as she called them, to really fight hard on her behalf spiritually. You Rise, I Fall was certainly the hardest one for me to write, to go back to that awful day. This is the moment of Julie's death. She was in the hospital and she was really fighting. She wanted to be a mother so much and to leave her little kids. And I don't know if she knew that this was going to be the day. She must have known in her heart. What I tried to do in this poem, to just bear it down to the rawest, most essential bits. And yet everything is still in there. The sounds of the machines in her room, the sound of her breath. The hardest part for me of the entire Sacred Veil is the third stanza of You Rise, I Fall, as I remember reaching to Julie's face and closing her eyes. And the idea of You Rise, I Fall, at that point, her spirit is rising. Her spirit is seeing the veil. She's seeing her loved ones there calling to her. And as her spirit rises, of course, mine fell. And that was the beginning of a journey for me. A journey of grief and raising our children by myself and trying to make sense of this world without her.
And I had this concept of You Rise musically, that we would be hearing these breaths and these moments of great silence in between the breaths.
It's one of the most dramatic things that I've ever heard a choir do. Those sliding chords and the fluidity of it, the anguish of the music matches the anguish I felt in that moment. It is very difficult for me to listen to that movement.
The thing that I hadn't counted on at all when we wrote the piece was how many people have been touched by this very specific experience of cancer.
I've had the same experience. After performances, people come up to me and they simply need to touch me. They hold my arm or grab my hand, and then they share their experience. And so I think the work has some power to speak to that. And one person even wrote that, she deals with mental illness and grief, and the piece made a huge difference in her life and in giving her the courage to move forward through her grief. But I think we all have grief journeys of one type or another, journeys of pain. And I think when we honor that in music and in poetry, it can be a very powerful force for healing.
Was asked to share some thoughts about grief, and I've really struggled with exactly the best way to give appropriate attention to such a complex and personal topic in just 10 quick minutes. Ultimately, what I came down with is there's 10 thoughts. Some may resonate, some may not. It's not exhaustive and it's not complete, but I'm hoping that something out of this group of 10 things will resonate and be healing for you. Number 10. Grief is complex, can often involve multiple losses at once. It doesn't always just pertain to death. Sometimes it's a loss of health, job, relationship, your role as a wife, a mother, a father, or it could be connected to another loss. Ambiguous loss is especially prevalent in times of COVID. We're not always able to say goodbye or hold funerals, or even see our loved ones in the same way that we were accustomed to doing. Losses are often common at times where our normal coping and our foundations of social relationships have been fractured due to the pandemic. When's the last time you hugged someone outside of your immediate family? Number 9, don't think of grief as something you have to get over, but more of something you have to learn how to live with. Realize the emotions, the memories, the thoughts, they're all ebb and flow. Let them be what they are and don't try to change them. It's not a memorial service. It's not a finite time period. It's more of a state of being. Number 8, be kind to yourself. You're grieving. By now, you've likely heard of the 5 stages of grief. There's anger, there's denial, bargaining, depression, and eventually acceptance. Many people will tell you you have to go in stepwise order through all of those stages. Contrary to what most people will tell you, it doesn't happen that way. It's more of a cloud, more of a circular process, one in which you experience each phase, sometimes at different time periods, sometimes multiple times. Realizing that just experiencing that grief through each stage is going to allow it to evolve. Some stages you may go through multiple times, some you may not even touch at all. It's normal, not abnormal. Much of it depends on the type of loss you experience and the circumstances around it. Not every loss is exactly the same, nor is your experience of grief with it. Number 7, when others ask what they can do, try and be prepared to tell them, even if it's just having their presence or a listening ear, or just getting you out of the house. It's especially important for you to be able to share this with your inner circle. They're going to be with you regardless. For those peripheral relationships, they do better with sometimes tangible tasks, acts of kindness. Most of the time, all the people in your life want to help, but really aren't sure how to do so. Making a list is okay, divide and conquer it. Get away from feeling like you're a burden, and grief is just a normal human response. Most understand, and we're gonna need that same support sometime later. Number 6, avoid making major life changes, especially big decisions, during that first year after your loss. Oftentimes we feel pressure to fix how we're feeling, or may even project our feelings of grief onto other areas of our life that seemed unfulfilling. In actuality, we're actually just processing our grief and putting it on something else. Combining major life events that are big changes can oftentimes lengthen our grief, create additional stress, and can be very disruptive emotionally. This includes our primary relationships, moving, changing jobs. Try and keep everything else as close to normal as possible, and then reconsider after a year has passed. Number 5, be prepared for holidays, birthdays, and anniversaries, which can make you feel increased sadness around your loss. This is especially true in that first year. You may find that you want to do something ritualistic that connects you to that person or loss. Be prepared for those special days, and it can involve something like a meaning to the day, such as honoring the loved one with a donation, or volunteering, or visiting the gravesite, reflecting on those memories. Remember, nothing has to be done, only when you're ready. For me, rainbows hold a special meaning for myself and multiple losses in my life. Every time I see one, I'm connected back. Number 4, get away from the shoulds. It's okay to break from tradition. There's no real correct way to grieve, just as there's no wrong way to grieve. Don't spend time beating yourself up on how you should be or trying to fit into a box of how you're supposed to grieve. Realize that there may be feelings of loss that surprise you. Just acknowledge it and don't avoid it. Number 3, avoid listening to others who tell you how you should be. Find those that will be with you, listen to you, and allow you to do this how you want to do it. People will say things that are oftentimes not very helpful, and often they're just what they find useful for them. Unfortunately, many people look for ways to avoid or restrict their feelings of grief, and often their advice can fall along those same lines. For the most part, they're at a loss as to what to say, and ultimately end up saying the wrong thing. Be forgiving and don't take it personal. They're trying to help. Number 2, have someone you can confide in and will support you. Losing a child, a spouse, having a family member with Alzheimer's, traumatic losses can oftentimes lead to extended time for grief. For ongoing support, there's a variety of bereavement counseling groups, some in the community, some online. Find something that fits for you. Many of these groups actually are formed with other people who've experienced a loss very much like you. Some are around miscarriages, infertility, unemployment, loss of a child. Look for something that fits and resonates with you and gets you the support that you need. Number 1, your loss is unique. Your relationship to that loss is unique, and so will be your response. It's going to take as long as it takes, and it's not prescriptive. Don't force it, don't avoid it, and oftentimes it's going to show back up when you least expect it. Grieving is a very personal and complex and challenging aspect of life as we know it. The circumstances surrounding that loss, how we approach it, and the environment we live in all contribute to how long, how intense, and how we grieve. Give yourself grace. Acknowledge those feelings. Allow your grief to evolve. Focus on good self-care, support, and engagement with your life after your loss. I wanted to leave you with one of my favorite quotes. It's from Helen Keller. What we have once enjoyed, we can never lose. All that we love deeply becomes a part of us. Music has an uncanny ability of connecting us to our senses and things that we can't see, but evokes a feeling. Grief is very much the same way. As you've been listening to the music, you may have started to experience some feelings, and maybe even some of the things that I mentioned came and resonated with you. My hope is that you'll take this, take some time, connect with others around you, support each other, and I wish you nothing but health, hope, and happiness as you move forward in your journey.